Today I'm going to talk about the prior knowledge interview that I conducted a couple weeks ago, and I'm just going to give you an overview of what I did and the findings and evidence that I found and some strategies to keep in mind when I start teaching. Now, the prior knowledge interview was conducted on two of my close family friends, but they were both girls. One was a 6th grader and one was a 9th grader. And I showed them a series of pictures. They had to put it in order, and then I asked them a bunch of questions about the pictures and about history in general. I can define prior knowledge as students' previous experiences, information, or their understanding about a current topic or a particular topic. And it's really important for teachers to assess how much their students know before they start a topic so that they know how to teach it and so that they know the various levels that that their students are at during the particular lesson. Because most of the time you'll have a student who's at a higher level and then a student who's kind of at a lower level who may not know that much about a specific topic. And it's the teacher's job to expand on this prior knowledge and make things interesting so that students can connect history with their prior knowledge and their current things in their life, with their life right now. So the first finding that I found was that the participants had little concept of time and the passing of time. They did a decent job with the chronology of the pictures. However, I felt when I was asking them the questions that they didn't quite understand the series of events. Like it was World War One, Great Depression, World War Two. They got a lot of the dates mixed up, and they didn't quite understand really the concept of time and the passing of time. When they were asked what it would be like to live in this particular picture during that time period, their answers were often really brief and didn't really go into detail, which demonstrated that they might not quite understand how different things were in the past than they are today. So that was my first conclusion. And from that, I drew that I don't think they really I don't think they were really asked why enough. I don't think they're taught to answer why to questions. I think they're more taught to just memorize. The second finding is that I found that they didn't really have a good idea of cause and effect, a good sense of cause and effect. They didn't fully grasp that certain changes affected individuals and the world, and they didn't connect changes to the bigger picture. So they didn't connect the changes to the rest of the world or the present day. Especially with my picture of women's suffrage, they understood that, okay, these women got the vote, but I don't think they fully connected that these women caused this through this to get this effect, if that makes sense. And they didn't connect that to the bigger picture. Like when I asked them about voting changes or about how government impacts their daily lives, none of them were like, well, I have the right to vote today when I'm 18 because they're young, but I didn't back, before women's suffrage movements. And they also didn't understand the causes and effects of World War One, World War Two, and the Civil War. They had very limited knowledge of what brought these wars about and the effects that these wars had on not only America but on the rest of the world. And the last conclusion that I drew was that they did not understand the difference between events. Things kind of blended together for them. For example, I asked one of the girls what the three most historically significant events were, and one of her responses was the wars, and she just knew that wars were important, but she didn't know which wars, she didn't know why they were important, and so she had a hard time separating between events and the differences between events. And that goes back to the chronology as well. As far as instructional implications, the first that I found was that it's definitely a necessity to assess prior knowledge. It's vitally important for teachers to learn what their students already know and what they don't know and what levels their students are at so that they can differentiate their instruction and they can learn how to teach based on what their students already know. They can plan the lesson based on that. Some strategies that I came up with were anticipatory guides and total participation techniques. There's an example of a true-false questionnaire, and the students are given about 5 to 10 statements, and they have to write whether they're true or false. An example of this would be the Great Depression only affected the United States, true or false. Most kids would put true, but then they go back after the lesson has been taught and they can put false, or what they think is the answer. And this is good because it gives teachers can give this to students before a lesson, and then they can assess it and know what they need to teach, what they need to focus on. And another thing is, of course, the KWL, what the students know, what they want to know, and what they have learned, as well as other anticipatory guides are useful. The second impact that I found on instruction was the need to properly teach the concept of chronology, time, and how things change over time. One of the best ways to teach chronology is have your students do a timeline. It makes students can then see how things overlap, how they are in sequential order depending on the event, and it really helps them bring that together. And the teaching social studies to English language learners really gave a good example of this when they talked about voting rights in America. And they're given a timeline, and they can either complete it individually or in small groups, and it teaches them the usefulness of a timeline and how to do it. And Cruz and Thornton, the authors of this book, stated that chronology and timelines really help ELL students because they allow them to visualize. So that's an added benefit. The third instructional implication that I found was that the teacher has to teach students about cause and effect. The easiest way to do this is to teach them about comparing and contrasting by using graphic organizers such as a Venn diagram, because then they understand first the differences between events, and then there's another graphic organizer presented in total participation techniques that allows students to write in the name of the event that they're studying, write the results of the event, the effects of the effects of the event today, and then in the first block they write in the causes. So that can be modified based on an event or a person, and just seeing that visual of here's a box, these are the causes, and there's actually an arrow that leads to the effects, and in the arrow you write down the results of the event. So seeing that visual graphic organizer, I think, would really help students understand cause and effect, and then coupling that with the Venn diagram, they can understand the difference between events. They can compare and contrast and understand similarities and differences. And the fourth implication is that students need to make the connection between history and their life now, and I think teachers should do this by enhancing students' critical thinking skills and analysis skills, because both of those things help students make a connection to their life now between past and present. And you can do this again through graphic organizers, and I like graphic organizers because you can level them based on the level of your students. You can adapt them to what you need for each student. And then, of course, Bloom's taxonomy, just asking bigger picture questions and higher level thinking questions will really get your students to think. And also concept mapping allows them to visually see the connection between events and then relate those events to their life today. All in all, this was a really great assignment. I liked it a lot. I liked how I got to really see firsthand the importance of prior knowledge, and I found some really useful information. So it was a good assignment, and I hope you've gotten something from my vlog. And I also am going to leave the links for all the 10 images that I used in my interview so that you can take a look at those.